our current legislation is. Next slide. We also have the Pneumoconiosis Act, which concentrates on workers exposed to dust in the workplace. And then the National Occupational Safety and Health Policy, which was first published in 2014, is the one which becomes a little bit modern and has been going through reviews every 5 years. So as you can see, our legislation is old, it's fragmented, and it has for us, the enforcer and the regulator, as much as it has, I think, for the players in the economy, has become very difficult to use and at times quite irrelevant. So this is the time for us to be moving into more modern and applicable legislation. We also subscribe to international instruments, particularly the ILO conventions, the technical conventions on OSH, where we have different pieces of conventions that we have there. Most of the conventions, the ones in black that we have ratified, they have not found expression within our own local acts. So we are signatories to these conventions where we ratified, but unfortunately we do not have that in our local frameworks. Also, looking at the ILO and the international platform, so occupational safety and health is now regarded as a fundamental right in the workplace. So it sits within the fundamental principles by the ILO, which includes certain things that are heinous in the workplace, like child labor, forced labor, and now OSH is sitting there, which shows the importance of occupational safety and health in the workplace. We are currently also looking at the promotional framework of occupational safety and health in the workplace, which is Convention 187, and we are running it together with the OSH bill in trying to also ratify that one. So you'll find that this journey has been very long for us. Next slide. For the past maybe 30 plus years, we have been trying to get to a point where we have a modern, harmonized, and easy to implement kind of legislation within the Zimbabwean landscape. We have gone through different paces and as a tripartite in trying to get this bill going. And for those who are here with us, our legislators, our board, this has been a bone of contention with the guys from industry for the longest time. It has sat on our resolutions since I joined NASA. People have been talking about how we should be having new legislation in occupational safety and health. Next slide. So in our objectives to coming up with this new act, which was very clear in the principles that we had, which were approved in 2016, and then they became the backbone of what we have today in the gazetted OSH bill, we were aiming to harmonize existing OSH laws, which are scattered. However, we were limited to those which are under the control of the Ministry of Public Service, Labour and Social Welfare. We also wanted to provide for all workers in all workplaces. Currently, the Factories and Works Act limits us as to where we can enforce occupational safety and health. We also wanted to maintain regulation of use of plant machinery and hazardous chemicals, also to domesticate the ratified and other key international instruments so that our environments become comparable to any other in the world. We wanted to formalize the tripartite forum, which is the Zimbabwe Occupational Safety and Health Council, which is best practice internationally. So this is what we wanted to ensure that it's there in our act so that we do not miss on it as we manage occupational safety and health. Also, in the current administrative arrangement which is there, where NASA has that delegated authority. This had not been reduced to an Act of Parliament, and this new bill then places the mandate of occupational safety and health within NASA. It also provides for solid funding mechanisms for OSH, which is very important if we're going to have well-structured occupational safety and health systems within the country. And it repeals the current legislations, which are the Factories and Works Act and the Pneumoconiosis Act. So you'll find that within the new bill, the provisions which were there in the two acts find expression in the new bill. Next slide. So going into the bill itself, I thought it was important for us to look at certain areas which spark discussion amongst us, which would interest us to see that do we have a comprehensive act which covers all of us to great satisfaction. We also, during the process of developing this, we had consultations locally, but we also managed to benchmark internationally for us to be able to come out with an act which then is applicable in Zimbabwe and covers everyone. So in part one of the bill, specifically in clause 2, the act applies to all workplaces. So it means exactly that. We had, during the initial consultations, a few reservations as to how we were going to implement this, but because of the nature and the contents which are within the Act, it is important that every worker is then covered, and how we do it is then expanded in the statutory instruments that we have, as well as in other provisions, which then allows us to go into any workplace. Interpretation, we have comprehensive list of definitions provided, and these were aligned with other pieces of legislation, including the Labour Act, the definition of a worker, a workplace, working environment, employee, and employer. Issues of loan, on-account workers, self-employed people, are all covered within the Act, with the aim of not leaving anyone behind. Next slide. The bill also establishes what we call the Occupational Safety and Health Department, and this department is sitting within the authority. This allows it to have the powers to then administer this bill administratively, placing it within the authority. It also establishes in the framework and the institution, it also establishes the Medical Bureau of Occupational Diseases. This bureau was actually in the Pneumoconiosis Act, where it was concentrating only on dust-related diseases. But within the new Act, it's going to be looking at more diseases than we had before. As we know, there are so many diseases which are coming from the workplace. So the Bureau then comes in as part of the institutional arrangement, which is there to manage occupational safety and health. Through consultations and talking to some of colleagues in industry, there was concern over this establishment of the Medical Bureau, but this does not go into compensation. Compensation is not within the current bill and the act that we're looking forward to having. It sits within a different framework and a different legislative instrument, which remains Statutory Instrument 68 of 1990. Next slide. The bill also explains the functions and the powers of NASA with respect to OSH as the department established in the Act to manage occupational safety and health. It gives powers of enforcement by inspectors. It also now comes in with issues related to promotions and training, It also brings in issues of occupational health services, which are not curative but preventive in nature. It also emphasizes on research in occupational safety and health and the development of guidelines, standards, regulations, and code of practices, which will help industry to ensure that the workplace is safe. The duties and roles, responsibilities of different stakeholders are clearly laid out for employers in clause 13, workers in clause 14, and clause 15 looking at manufacturers, designers, importers, sellers, distributors, and suppliers. This is, I think, very standard in all occupational safety and health laws, and this brings clarity as to who is responsible for what within industry. It also gives powers which was not very expressed in the current law, where prohibition of victimization and wage reductions in relation to OSH is clearly laid out. So retaliation and punishing for people related to occupational safety and health moves then becomes not allowed by the Act. So the worker now has the rights to remove themselves from unsafe work and to also give information that is now very clear within our law. And this is something that is demanded for by international instruments that we are signatory to. The registration and notification of occupational accidents and diseases, which is something that we have been struggling with as the authority, now comes in as part of the Act, where every workplace should have a register of accidents. This then becomes important for our data as we are able to track what is happening and be able to do interventions. So every employer would then be mandated to have these registers within their workplace. Funding of occupational safety and health operations within the country are now very clearly laid out within the bill, where the accident prevention workers' compensation becomes the main funding for the operations, but also monies can be appropriated from Parliament for the authority to use in occupational safety and health and in line with activities related to the bill when it comes, and also charges by the authority and donations. So there is going to be a specific fund which looks into occupational safety and health activities. The Zimbabwe Occupational Safety and Health Council, this was also in clause 40. In the consultations and in feedback that we got from industry, this was also something that was being asked about. However, the Zimbabwe Occupational Safety and Health Council has been in existence for the longest time. It's a pre-independence body which is now in full force as the Zimbabwe Occupational Safety and Health Council. You see that the edition of this particular conference is the 62nd edition, and that's how old this council is. So the council has been existent for the longest time. However, it was not legislated. This council serves as a tripartite forum where discussions are done on occupational safety and health, and the discussions that are done at this particular council inform the minister on the actions that need to be done in occupational safety and health. And the Constitution is equal representation of government, labor, and employers. The Act also allows us to have a raft of new regulations which are going to answer most of the things that we have had as concerns from industry. It will come from the General Management of Occupational Safety and Health, where we are talking the professionals who are going to be looking after our workers in Zimbabwe, to very technical ones. And these are some of the regulations that are already being prepared as we prepare for the final promulgation of this act. So there is going to be a lot of supporting regulations, but the minister also has powers to give instructions, to give directions as we respond to everything that is coming within the environment. I think this we saw when COVID came and became a workplace issue. There was no country which had a ready regulation related to that, but responsiveness of our legislation and how it allows us to have those instructions and regulation then makes us ready to deal with anything, including the things that we're discussing today, AI, emerging issues. We should then be able to respond to anything that will be coming into the workplace as far as keeping our workers safe. So in general, this is what we have within the Act. I think most of you have gone through the bill as was gazetted on the 8th of August this year. And the next steps that we have, I think some of you would have participated in the public consultation, because now it's out of our hands as the people who started the process. It's now in the hands of our legislators, and they have gone through a public consultation where they were hearing from the public what they want this bill to look like. And the next steps that we're expecting, we've gone through the first reading, we have gone through the public consultations. We're hoping that soon we have the second sitting, reading in Parliament, which would then lead into committee stages. The committee stages are in the different, and then it being sent to the two houses of Parliament, where discussions and debates will be held on the bill. We hope this will be a very progressive process that we'll have, and that will enrich our final product, which is the Occupational Safety and Health Act. And so this is a process that is squarely under the control of our Parliament, and as we go forward, us together with industry, with the help that we're getting from you, we are now drafting the delegated or subsidiary legislations, which are our statutory instruments that we are currently busy preparing, so that by the time the Act is promulgated, we are ready for making our workplaces safer. So in conclusion, what we say is that this new Act, we believe it should revolutionize what is happening in occupational safety and health administration in Zimbabwe at national level up to the shop floor where we do the work in protecting the workers. It should improve our occupational safety and health standard, and it endeavors to protect all workers against conceivable hazard risks that occur at the workplace. I thank you.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you very much, Dr. Betty, for highlighting the path that we've walked in the development of this harmonized legislation, also highlighting the key objectives, one of them being the harmonization of fragment pieces of legislation, some as old as the Rhodesia government notice, also highlighting the establishment of the Occupational Safety and Health Department, and regularizing the operations of the Zimbabwe Occupational Safety and Health Council. Another big round of applause for Dr. Betty. We move on. If you have got any questions, kindly take them down, and then we'll open the session to plenary. Our next presenter, we are going to call upon Tinashe Nokwara. Can we applaud her? You can take a seat. Tinashe, who is Tinashe? Tinashe is the head of audiologists at the Audiomax Audiology Center, bringing over 10 years of experience to the field. She holds a BSc Honours and a Master's in Audiology from the University of Cape Town in South Africa, and is currently pursuing a doctorate from the same university. Tinashe has a strong passion for training and capacity development, which led her to play a key role in establishing the BS Honours Audiology program at the University of Zimbabwe. Let's applaud her for that. Tinashe is currently a lecturer there and leads the audiology department. She has specialized in MED, EL products for nearly a decade now, and extends her impact by volunteering with other trusts to try and share her experiences. Tinashe is going to share with us on occupational exposure. That is the topic, to noise and noise-induced hearing loss. Tinashe, can I invite you to come to the podium? Let's applaud her.
Good morning, everyone. And thank you so much for the opportunity to share the work that we do. Allow me to say all protocols observed. Next slide. So I'm just going to start by giving a brief background of what occupational noise-induced hearing loss is, just so that we are on the same page, and then I would get into the study that we did and the findings that we got. Next slide. So there's a lady called Helen Keller. Some of you may know her, an American author who was blind and also had hearing loss, but she managed to go on to achieve a lot of things and even earn her degree. But in her words, being a person who has experienced both blindness and deafness, Helen Keller says, blindness cuts us from things, but deafness cuts us from people, which is then what leads to the statement at the top where I wrote, hearing is a gift, but do we actually place enough value on it? So just a quick test. Who has had their hearing tested within the last year? Can you just show by raising your hand? Within the last year, hearing tested within the last year? Well done. And then who has had their hearing tested ever in their whole life? A little bit more hands. Okay, that's a little bit encouraging. I was afraid I was going to have a heart attack because we are the people who are supposed to be implementing these things. But if it's an afterthought, even for our personal health, how much more for the people we are supposed to serve? Next slide. So some of the causes for hearing loss, I've just picked a few that address adults. The one cause that's there that we can actually prevent is noise. everything else, we cannot avoid getting old. We cannot afford some of the effects that happen when you're giving certain medication, but noise is the only thing that we can actually prevent. Next slide. So I'd want you to appreciate then the impact that it has on people and just some of the signs. I know you probably know one or two people who have problems with their hearing, maybe an agogo or someone you have to shout a lot when you're speaking to them. People who struggle with background noise when there's a lot of people. And then pane kunonzi kuunga. Nashinzeve zangu ndonzwa dzichiunga kuti wi amusi kuroiwa musatye. It's just called tinnitus. It's a sign that you might be having hearing loss and you need to have your ears checked. So musatye zvenyu. So those are some of the signs, the common signs that are there for hearing loss, and we just want to appreciate the impact that it can have on our lives. You can move to the next slide. So even though in this presentation I'm more going to be talking for the employee rather, but even as an employer, you need to appreciate if you don't take these things into action, because when there's occupational noise-induced hearing loss, it actually lowers the productivity of the workers, and it in turn places a high economic burden on the society. And on a personal level, what we also need to appreciate is you can have brain atrophy, social isolation, and dementia. And now that people are acknowledging the effects of mental health issues is things that we need to address. And another aspect of it that we often forget is just the safety of the person. We don't tend to think a lot, when you're crossing roads or whatever, but what about the person who can't hear? They are prone to, they can't hear the warning signs, they can't see that a car is coming, and then they are in danger simply because they cannot hear. So we need really to appreciate the emotional impact that it has on the person. So when we're talking of noise-induced hearing loss, it is an irreversible damage of the hair cells in the cochlea, and this is caused by exposure to noise. In as much as we're talking about occupational noise, but even general recreational noise has the same effect on it. And this is what happens over a duration of time, and it does depend on the severity and the intensity of the noise they're exposed to. So you might have what we call a temporary hearing loss. So for example, you go to a concert or you're in church and you're sitting right by the speaker, and then when you move from the place, you can get that tinnitus. Your ears are complaining that they have been exposed to too much noise, but after a while that goes away because maybe that happened once in a while. But now imagine someone who has to work in this environment where they're constantly in that space for a longer period of time. And it affects the high frequencies. So those are frequencies like female voices or children's voices that mainly fall into those high frequencies, which then affect speech. So that's why they will struggle with understanding speech in background noise and things like that. So I just wanted to show you a picture of what a normal hair cells look like. And then when they are damaged, that's why we're saying it's irreversible. The hair cells are not able to regenerate or regrow. So once the damage is done, hence the need to protect ourselves. From an audiological perspective, because I know some of the people do audiometric tests here and there, there's the most common, you're looking for your noise notch at 4 kilohertz and stuff. That's the really typical. But any notch in your high frequency range, and then the longer it can progress into your lower frequencies. And with noise-induced hearing loss, then it's typically if it affects both ears. Slight differences with when it's due to aging. When it's due to aging, the hearing loss tends to accelerate over time, but when it's due to noise, it then tends to decelerate over time. And now it's when you're exposed to noise levels that are more than 85 dB. We can move on. Next slide. So these are some of the occupations we generally know to be affected by noise. Next slide. So we all really have an 8-hour workday, but when we are talking of being in the mines and in the factories, because we want productivity, how many hours do people usually work? Do they do 10-hour shifts, 12-hour shifts? Do we not have people in those industries Will I be lying if I say they are 12-hour shifts? It is true, right? So now with this, we are saying if someone is exposed to 85 dB and they have no form of protection, they are fine for 8 hours. But realistically, we know our shifts are longer than that. And realistically, we also know even if we give people earplugs and earmuffs, they do not wear them or they do not wear them correctly. So now we are going to assume as though they do not have any form of protection. So what we are saying is when you now increase 5 decibel, the amount of time they need to spend in that place has to half. So at 90 decibels, they now need to be in that place only for 4 hours. At 110, it means they need to be in that place only for 15 minutes. So if you're now thinking of where you work, your workstations, and someone is using, I don't know, a jackhammer or things that have that kind of noise, how much time are they actually spending there? When the roads were being resurfaced and rebuilt, you'd see the people with the jackhammers, they would have everything else, the helmet, the shoes, and then no earplugs, but they're using that thing where they're supposed to use it for even less than 15 minutes, but they're there for an hour, 2 hours the whole day. So hearing then ends up becoming an afterthought or the last thing that people think of. Next slide. So just to touch a bit of prevalence of hearing loss, roughly there are 1.5 billion people with complete or partial hearing loss. And of these, 430 million actually require some form of intervention. And then WHO even estimates that by 2050, an additional 2.5 individuals will be added to that number. So it is something that we cannot ignore and we need to pay attention to. And also another study by WHO shows that even though someone would acknowledge or now know that they have an issue with their hearing, it usually takes 5 to 6 years for them to actually seek a solution and go to the right health professional to help them. And now in that period, then it will end up affecting them and it can come through depression or mental health issues that come. So moving now to our experiences, there is research that has shown that noise-induced hearing loss is a top 5 occupational illness in Zimbabwe. Unfortunately, then data for these things is really scarce, and some of the studies, there are studies that have been done, but they can't really be generalized to the whole population. There's the one study that's usually cited that was done by Chadambuka and at a mining company, and already you can see the departments that are there, they're all above 85 dB, and the prevalence of in their study was about 36.7, and they found that the noise-induced hearing loss increased as a function of age and as a function of where they are working. So in as much as the workers would know that, okay, this is a noisy area or whatever, there was no documented hearing conservation program at that mine at the particular time. So the studies have been done, and the links are clear of the link between the environments and noise-induced hearing loss. But like we're saying, there is lack of data to show the trends that are there. And now with the framework regulations, especially in our situations and in developing countries, they might not even exist, or if they are there, then they are probably weak. Which then led us to us trying to do our study, because if we then produce the data, it can then help us to push policy to make things work better. You can move on to the next slide. Yes, you can move on. Right. So it was a retrospective record review study using a purposive sampling. You can move on to the next slide. So with our sample size, we ended up using 1,698. Just looking at other literature reviews, people ranged from 150 to even 30,000, but we just wanted to have some sort of statistical significance. Yes, you can move on. I'm just wanting to show you that we did due diligence, so you can move on. And we did get approval from JREC. So to touch on the main findings from what we did, the overall prevalence was 9 point. You can move on to the next slide. 9.4. This is from 2017 to 2024. Why 2017? Because that is when we started doing audiometric checks in terms of hearing conservation. So that's the data that was available. Sorry, you can just go back. So in the first year, then the prevalence was 19.8, and then COVID happened. So because operations ceased, there was that dip, and then it picked up. You can go to the next slide. So just a visual and to see the actual trend that we had. Thank you. So in regards to gender distribution, standard, there were more males than females. And with regards to age, it really ranged, and the average age was 46 years of age. Yes. And then the departments, so there were 38 departments, the high-risk departments was engineering with 18%, production 16%, and manufacturing and mining at 7%. So there were 38 departments that were there, but we ended up combining some of them just so that it can look a little bit clearer with the visuals. So someone might just think, okay, fine, with the trends that were there, with the fluctuations, maybe there's really nothing to it. But the fluctuations were actually statistically significant. And because it was a retrospective study, I mean, we can't really answer why. We could only speculate. And obviously, some of the things is because of COVID, and then operations ceased. But once operations started, it's as though people were trying to compensate for all the loss, which then led to really a surge in the cases in 2021. Yeah, you can move on. And with the gender pattern, it really conforms to what is there worldwide, where we have more males being in traditionally noise-intensive departments versus females. And with the departments that are really at high risk, your engineering and production, really those are the ones that use heavy machinery and sometimes old machinery that, if they're not well maintained and people are not wearing their HPEs properly, and they are then prolonged to noise for a longer period of time. So to tie into the next point that I'm going to say, there's a study that was done by Mapranga, and in their findings, the attitudes and the perceived risk played a crucial role in the people adhering to safety protocols. So even though they were aware and they were given their PPEs, the use of it was really suboptimal, and that's due to their attitudes, forgetfulness, or lack of enforcement. I always feel like if you tell someone to do something but without explaining why, the chances of them doing it fully is less. And that's why there is need for education. And in this case, we're also seeing that they really, in as much as you can have a general hearing conservation program, there is also a need for targeted department-specific interventions. So in summary, in case someone missed anything, that was the prevalence, that was the 9.4. Then it becomes lower than general prevalences before because of the COVID item, but it did expose the weakness in our high-risk departments and the need to make sure there's continuous regulatory enforcement to make sure our employees are protected. So, okay. So you can move on. Sorry. You can move on. Sorry, running out of time, so I'm just going to go to the last ones. Just move on with the... Yes. So at the end of the day, we're saying noise-induced hearing loss is preventable. So if we can focus on that, it would help. It will help the employee by protecting them. It will help the employer. Because if we do not protect them, they're going to get where they now need intervention. Now you have to pay for, instead of just paying for protection, now you have to pay for their hearing aids or cochlear implants, which is way more costly than if you're just given appropriate hearing protective devices that they need. And so we work as a team, whatever ear issues that they might need. Sometimes with the earplugs, they're not very hygienic in terms of they might leave them hanging, and then there's dust, they put them back in the ears, they get infections, so it becomes a cycle. But the solution is there, and we are there to help you. But if we can focus on prevention and focus on protecting our workers, I think that will be ideal. So in a nutshell, they are earplugs, they are earmuffs, but they're also custom-made protective devices called noise bands that can check this person works in an environment that's 110. They're custom-made to the shape of their ears. Then you have a filter that adjusts the level of noise so that it's below 85. And that way, they don't need to remove them to hear the next person talking to them or to hear another alarm going on. So you know they're going to wear them consistently, and you know they're going to give them the protection that they need, and everyone is safe and everyone is happy. So at the end of the day, I think we really just need to work together. You can move on. Yes, you can move on. So, because we are all in this room, I think we can make a difference if we join hands and make sure that we do what is expected of us. I also just need to acknowledge also my students who made sure that this research happened. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Tinashe. A big round of applause, especially for highlighting that we can control noises in the factories so that we also take care of our hearing. Very important message there, because once the hearing is lost, then everything that we are trying to do in that production line is a waste, because sometimes, our employees are not hearing, are not receiving the messages correct. So what is key for me, perhaps what I have noted, is for us to also look at the duration of our shifts. How many hours are we exposing our workers to these noisy environments? Also to look at the machinery, the type of machinery that we are using. Some of it is old and making all noises. Can we try and see to it that it's fixed? Thank you very much, Tinashe, for sharing, especially the outcome of the research. A big round of applause. If you can take note also on the questions that you might have for Tinashe, we move on with our program. And in our program, I'm left with 2 items: the biological hazards and the ILO Convention 192 on protection against biological hazards. This topic is going to be delivered by Dr. Benjamin Mtetwa, who is not new to us. We all know him. He has been in the authority for a long time. Dr. Mtetwa is a Chief Research and Development Officer. Let's applaud him as he comes to the podium. And you can take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, for giving me this opportunity to share with you what I would consider is more of a sensitization presentation in view of recent developments which are ongoing internationally, as well as ensuring that we also try to bring them home. You can go to the next slide. Biological hazards are a much topical issue. You can appreciate that even as recently as this year at the ILC Geneva conference, we had a landmark decision where the international community did produce the Convention on Protection Against Biological Hazards. And that's quite a significant development in the sense that because of the importance of this subject, the international community recognized the need to develop a standard which can help various member states in order to protect workers in various high-risk work environments. I'll just run through just a brief introduction, a very important definition for biological hazards, some of the preventive measures, and an overview of the Convention on Protection Against Biological Hazards. Now, the issue of biological hazards, and more particularly the development of the convention, which came into being, which was under discussion over the past 2 years and came into being this year, was really more necessitated by the fact that the COVID-19 pandemic was a major issue. It was quite devastating, as we all know, and as a result, it meant that there was a need for the global community to develop a much more specific standard to try and help member states on the issues around exposure to biological hazards. You can also be aware of other very severe diseases in the form of SARS, influenza A, Ebola, just to name a few. And certainly those that quickened the need for the development of a specific instruments. You'll notice that some of the key workplaces which are prone to biological hazards are hospitals and laboratories, animal handling. These are key places, certainly, which we see workers being exposed to biological hazards. Sewage maintenance facilities, collection of waste, funeral parlors. These are some of the main key points as far as exposure to biological hazards are concerned. I'm sure we can relate quite well, particularly for those in local authorities. You can say that there is no local authority which does not have sewage treatment works. And as a result, we need to be reminded about the problems associated with workers who are operating in those areas. Next slide, please. So when it comes to biological hazards, this is a very important definition. And I want to believe that for those who are in workplace settings where I've made reference to some of those workplaces, you may need to take a closer look in terms of what is being considered as a biological hazard. Being any microorganisms, cell cultures, just to name a few, but certainly they present harm to those who are exposed. And they include your bacteria, viruses, parasites, fungi, prions, DNA material. And all these, we find ourselves interacting with them if you are in that particular work environment which presents hazardous exposure to biological agents. So when we talk about exposure to biological hazards, then we are talking about that situation or that event of which workers can come into, or they are in close contact or close proximity to those biological hazards, and in the end, they present harm to those workers. You can appreciate the various modes of transmission which are associated with these hazardous agencies, either through the air, either through water, or other even just simple conduct. It can be a very big way in which infection is actually transmitted. Next slide, please. This is a very key slide, a very important one, because when you look at legislation worldwide, and even the one which we have already developed as a draft, which is going to come along with our OSH bill, you find that generally biological agents are classified into 4 major categories. This is where your risk assessment starts. If you are in that particular setting, you need to be well grounded and have a deeper understanding of the fact that when we are talking about group 1, this is biological agents which are unlikely to cause any harm. You think of your E. coli. And that's why local authorities, they are quite specific when they come to testing E. coli in your water used for human consumption. The presence of too numerous to count E. coli, it is an indicator of perhaps fecal contamination. But generally, these kind of biological hazards do not present any significant risk which we can talk about. Then group 2 is those biological hazards, they still can cause human disease. They might be a hazard to workers, but they are unlikely to be spreading to the community. Yes, they can be a hazard, but we leverage on the fact that we do have access to effective prophylaxis or some treatment regimes. You can think of your Salmonella or Staphylococcus. These are bacteria for which, if you are exposed to them, you can easily be treated. But as you can see, as we go to group 3 category, these cause severe human disease. But again, we are able to have access to effective treatment. But you should be aware that if a person is exposed to this kind of biological agents, then they can be present very serious harm to those workers. You are talking of your mycobacteria, tuberculosis, HIV viruses. These are very serious exposures, but at least we can have some treatment one way or the other. Now, I think in Zimbabwe, perhaps we can talk of about group 1 up to 3, maybe to a lesser extent group 4. Yes, group 4, severe, it presents severe human disease, very serious in dimension, and it presents a very high risk in terms of spreading to the community, very fast for that matter. And one of the most problems with group 4 biological agents is that they do not have any effective treatment which is known at that particular point in time. So they are quite difficult to deal with. You think of your Ebola, the Marburg viruses. These are some of the typical examples of group 4 biological agents. When you see these signs, you should always remember that they are pictograms which are alerting you to biological agents. Every time you see these on labels, it's a way of sensitizing all of us to be quickly aware of the need to take the necessary precautions in trying to handle those agents. Now, when it comes to preventive and protective measures against biological agents, I think most OSH practitioners are aware of the hierarchy of controls. It still applies when it comes to issues of biological agents. I will not be dwelling much on it, but suffice to say that one of the key issues around biological agents has to do with your hazard identification and risk assessment. And I'm sure that's why even from the OSH bill, which Dr. Pete was talking about, it clearly expresses, it compels all industries, all workplaces to ensure that a risk assessment is actually carried out at each and every workplace, precisely for the fact that, for the reason that it becomes one of the key issues which enables you to, or which informs you what kind of direction are you going to take as far as controls are concerned. So hazard identification is critical, and from the context of biological hazards, you can appreciate the slide which I was talking about, the categorization of various biological agents, group 1 up to group 4. What kind of a biological agent are you handling? And what kind of activities, in what setting are you operating in, which can trigger, which can inform you to put in place appropriate measures? What is the nature of exposures? Is it through droplet infection? Is it contact? What kind of instruments are you using which can present those exposures? You also need to take into account the competencies of people who are operating in certain workplace setting. This is a very important matter. You'll find that if you recall from Ganter's presentation from Belgium, he made reference quite a lot to issues to do with biological agencies. And to that extent, you find that issues of competence come in. They come in. We need specialists, biologists, microbiologists, people who are well trained in that, who have been well calibrated within the space of occupational safety and health. You can also go through the usual risk prioritization matrix depending on the envisaged kind of category which your biological hazard is going to sit in. What kind of strategy can you use in order to evaluate the risk so that you are able to say at the end of it all, is it in group 1 or is it group 3 or group 4? And risk prioritization becomes one strategy which you can use. Hazard analysis, those are some of the techniques which can inform you in what category you are likely to put the biological agents. And obviously, you go down to issues to do with your likelihood and the severity of harm which may arise as a result of being exposed to those biological agents. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide. Right. Engineering controls are very key. You will find that biological agents, when it comes to engineering controls, one of the key features, obviously, which you are going to see at play, is biosafety cabinets. And these, in most cases, they have to be certified that they are working in a manner which is expected. There are certain specific standards which are out there when it comes to handling biological agents. And one of the key engineering features which we normally want to see being deployed in workplaces where biological agents are actually there is the issue of biosafety cabinets, depending obviously in terms of what work environment which we are talking about. But what is critical about these facilities is the certification which goes along to try and ensure that those workers who are operating in that space are indeed working with equipment which is able to contain the biological hazards. Sharp containers, centrifuge safety caps, splash plugs are some of the key features when it comes to engineering controls. Then there's secondary containment, which is very important, which speaks to the design. It speaks to the design features of a work environment which is handling biological agents. Next slide, please. Administrative controls are very critical when it comes to biological agents. This is where you see a lot of strict protocols. Standard operating procedures have to be rigidly followed. You would find that some of these standard operating procedures differs from one biological agent to the other. But what is key, what I may need just to mention around that is to ensure that the proper standard operating procedures are developed, they are rigidly followed, they are evaluated to see their effectiveness, and there's proper supervision to ensure that those people who are supposed to follow them, they are actually following them religiously. The next slide, please. The issue of PPE, I'm sure we have seen this during the COVID era, where when you're talking about people dealing with COVID issues, they are actually in more like space suits in order to ensure that those workers get very minimal or no infection at all. And if this matter is not well informed by your risk assessment, you would find that personal protective equipment can be a major source. It can become one of the major sources of exposure. And that's why it needs to be well informed by the hazard identification and risk assessment. Next slide, please. The issue of medical surveillance is important. You'll notice that quite a number of biological agencies would come along with the need for medical surveillance, issues of immunization. You need to be guided accordingly by experts, occupational medical practitioners, in order to have the appropriate kind of medical surveillance which is required for specific biological hazardous exposures. So it's always something which is critical. If you are handling biological agents, seek the necessary technical expertise from well-trained medical practice, occupational health practitioners, so that you are able to follow through an appropriate and well standardized medical surveillance programs. And obviously, the issues of records and reporting becomes important. We need to document all this. Next slide, please. Now, when it comes to biological agents, remember I've talked about group 1 up to group 4. You would find that the next 2 slides just gives you an overview of some of the measures which can be put in place in order to try and minimize exposure. For instance, if you're talking about the group 1, biosafety level number 1, as it is normally found in a number of literature spaces. Remember I said this is the least or minimal kind of hazardous exposures for which just basic laboratory practices are enough in order to prevent any exposure. Good hygiene practices are sufficient for us to be protected against exposures. Then if you talk about biolevels, safety number 2, obviously the measures are becoming a bit more stricter. Restricted access, what kind of PPE needs to be followed, proper use and handling of the kind of PPE has to be followed through to the extent that even disposal issues have to be taken into account. Then if you go to biolevel number 3 and 4, obviously, as you can see, the kind of measures there are becoming a bit more elaborate. Biosafety level number 3, we are talking about laboratories which requires controlled access. Not anybody can just get there. The kind of respiratory protection becomes very elaborate. Specialized ventilation system, specialized self-contained breathing apparatus becomes an issue as you go to level 3 and in particular level 4. Next slide, please. There are just a few legislative provisions in this country in some standards, but you find that we are still developing as a country, and as a result, the need for developing a specific regulatory framework on protection against biological agents becomes important, particularly against the backdrop of the recently adopted Convention 192 on protection against biological agents. We have got a few guidelines within the Ministry of Health, which guides a number of healthcare facilities throughout the country, the veterinary department also, the National Biotechnology Authority. There are some guidelines which helps us to deal with that. But from an occupational setting, you would find that the need for a piece of regulation on biological agents becomes key. Now, let me just run through the brief overview of the Convention 192 on biological agents. You would find that it follows almost to what I was saying previously in terms of what is expected to be dealt with when you talk about protection against biological agents. So when you go to this particular convention, it's easily accessible on the ILO website, you find that it talks about the scope where biological agents, the convention applies, all economic activities which handles biological agents. It includes a very broad definition which is important for us to understand, as I have already highlighted earlier on, and it gives some of the key focus high-risk activities. I think I've already mentioned that during my earlier introduction. And then it goes into preventive and protective measures, precisely what I've been talking about, the issue of hazard identification and risk assessment. And it emphasizes more on risk-based prevention to ensure that we focus on those workplaces which are more prone to exposure to hazardous agencies. The issue of hierarchical controls, I need not emphasize on that. But more significantly, on the convention is the issue of emergency preparedness and response planning. This is a key feature within the convention itself. And even to the extent that even as we develop our own procedures elsewhere, we need to ensure that we deal with that. Then occupational health and occupational health services. This is from a preventive point of view, not from a curative point of view, but is more on a preventive side of things. And then the convention also emphasizes a lot in terms of reporting, in terms of recording, in terms of notification. In Zimbabwe, we are privileged that we already have a framework upon or which compels all organizations to report all occupational diseases to the authority. And we can ride on that, such that even as the convention came in, already in terms of practice in this country, we are already doing quite a lot. Rights and duties, I may not need to emphasize on that. Some of the issues have already been covered through the OSH bill. There's quite a lot in terms of what is expected now for workplaces to observe the rights and duties of workers as far as exposure to biological agents are concerned, and indeed even other hazardous agencies, as you may think about. Let's go to the next slide, please. Just in conclusion, biological agents are very important. Indeed, this is a fairly new dimension, particularly when it comes to hazardous exposures in this country. And to that extent, it has also motivated the country to ensure that as part and parcel of the national OSH system development in this country, we should be able to have a specific statutory instrument which speaks to issues to do with protection against biological agents. I stop here, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you very much for taking us through this important instrument, Convention 192 on biological hazards, covering the scope. And what I've taken note of is your grouping of the classification of biological hazards, because it is key when it comes to risk assessment. Another big round of applause. Now I open this session to plenary. If there are any questions, roving mic, you identify yourself, and then you give the question.
Thank you very much for very insightful presentations, all the presenters. I think my question goes to Tinashe. I'm sure that's the name. Yeah. Going back to AI, sorry. Going back to AI, which I believe we all agree is quite topical currently, Tinashe, in what way can AI be of help in controlling environments and to mitigate the risk of hearing loss? Thank you.
We take another question. Middle row, there's a hand there.
My name is Susan from Manica Boards and Doors. My question is directed to Tinashe. I've got two questions. Could you please shed more light on the factors to consider for us to come up with accurate audiometric test results? Because I've had a situation where we did the tests on site, and a number of people were affected with noise-induced hearing loss, ranging from suspected cases to severe cases. And then we made a decision to repeat the test off-site. And then some of the employees were cleared, especially those with suspected cases, and partly with moderate. And then those with severe cases remained the same. So could you please shed more light on factors to consider for us to come up with accurate results? And then the second question is on medical surveillance program, coming up with a medical surveillance program. I would like to believe that in the NASA 68 of 1990, it talks about monitoring and maintaining records for exposures, but we don't have the frequency of monitoring those exposures. So in line with noise, could we have something determining frequency based on the risk profiles? For example, if our employees are exposed to 100 dB, maybe we can come up with a medical surveillance program of testing them once or twice or thrice a year, something like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Right at the back. Do you have a mic?
Okay, can I say out my question? I have a mic here.
Okay. Thank you. My name is Tatenda Nyenda from Ziosh. I have 2 questions, if not 3, for Tinashe. Thank you very much, Tinashe, for the very insightful presentation on workplace noise and noise-induced hearing loss. My question comes from the fact that there is always confusion between correlation and causation. And from your research, you seem to have attributed 9.4 of the cases to occupational noise, occupational noise hearing loss. I wanted to check, how did you separate noise-induced hearing loss, that is non-occupational, and probably the occupational noise-induced hearing loss, considering that it may be the same ear that will be exposed to the noise at the workplace or outside the workplace. And it's a reality in society that the same artisan or miner who is manning a jackhammer is the same guy who is also dancing to Itase Unononga at the nearest bar. Then the other question also goes to the factors of research that you had. I think you had wonderful questions or answers on perhaps noise-induced hearing loss cases per age, per gender, and so forth. I would be happy if you can shed more light in terms of how you managed to test either the significance of the influence of age on the outcomes and the influence of the gender or sex on the outcomes, outside the fact that probably there are many males who work in noise areas. How did you manage to control it from a research perspective? And was there any interactive effect of those factors on the outcome that you were looking for? And again, issues of the workstation itself. Your first slides were talking about more noise areas or occupations. And in your research, did you manage really to find either significant influence or differences on cases with respect to work stations? Thank you for that. Then my last one goes to Mr. Mtetwa. I think this one is just a compliment for giving us new information. Imagine this is a convention adopted in 2025. And by us being privileged to be here, we have actually gotten the current affairs in this one. Thank you so much for that. Probably I'll be happy if you can shed more light on the steps the nation is going to follow to try and perhaps ratify this and learn from the lessons that we get from it on the ground.
Thank you very much. I think we will pause questions for now and allow Tinashe to respond. Most of the questions, actually the bulk of these questions are for you, Tinashe. The first one is if you can highlight, the factors that one can come up with in order to have accurate tests. There was also one on medical surveillance, the monitoring of exposures, and then Tatenda was focusing more on your research, how you separated, the factors that you took into account in order for you to come out with those outcomes. Over to you, Tinashe.
Okay, thank you so much, and thank you. I think the hardest part of presenting is the questions. So I think there was the first one with the, regarding how to incorporate AI. So so you can always, when we're looking at noise engineering strategies that you can use, you can incorporate them there, and as well as now with noise cancellation, with the headphones and stuff, those are things that can also be used to incorporate AI. And yesterday, I know one of my colleagues was speaking on smart PPE, so those are some of the things that use AI that can be incorporated when it comes to noise specifically. So I can't remember who was sitting where, I couldn't see where, so I'm just going to speak to the crowd. And then the factors to consider in order to get accurate audio tests. So you're quite right in the sense that when you're in one environment, someone was suspected to have a test, and then when you moved, they were cleared. So ideally, you'd want to measure the environment that you're in to see that is it in an acceptable range, because it will definitely affect. And when there is noise, it's the lower frequencies even sometimes that are affected much more. So you now need to know, is this an acceptable noise levels? And if you need to incorporate correction factors to your findings afterwards or not. So that's one aspect. And then the other aspect that might not have been your case, but is the equipment as well. Is your equipment calibrated? Because if it's not calibrated, you're also going to get skewed results. And then sometimes also it then needs more training, continuous training. Sometimes you get new people coming in to do the test, you might just need training. But if you ever need help with any of that, we're also available to help you, so you can feel free to reach out afterwards. And then the question on surveillance, monitoring exposures in high-risk departments. So with more high-risk departments, we usually recommend getting them tested biannually. But it also comes down to, if you do have an effective hearing conservation program in place at your workplace, then you actually can tailor-make it. If you feel there's the even need to do it quarterly, then you do it based on that. But literature can say with those ones you can do biannually. So in addition to doing the test biannually, you also want to make sure they have adequate hearing protection devices. So in those environments as well, with the high risk, sometimes they recommend even using double protection, your earplugs and your ear muffs. But sometimes the workers will not find it very comfortable. Then the elephant in the room with the correlation and causation, that one is difficult to separate. So in part of my presentation, I was highlighting some of the stuff you can look at from an audiogram perspective, where we're saying if it's a noise-induced hearing loss, it presents itself in this way. We expect to see a noise notch. If there isn't any noise notch, we know it's really more of the high frequencies and things like that. But yes, it then is difficult to separate. So what then we always recommend is, if you then make sure every employee that comes, before they even start, if you have your pre-test done, you can then use that for comparison, maybe per se, and monitoring along the way. Also for the fact that sometimes after they leave your company, they can come back and say, "Nagazo kwarandiro company kwenyu," but then you can use that for records to show, okay, your hearing threshold only changed this much when you're with us. But you say this is presbycusis, because it's all sensory neural hearing loss, whether it's presbycusis or whether it's noise-induced hearing loss, it's affecting the same aspect of the same cochlea. So that one is a little bit harder to separate. But you can try to look out for some of those features audiologically. influence of age and gender on outcomes. So the study that was done by Chadamboka that I mentioned earlier, in their study, they did show there was a significant influence statistically on with noise-induced hearing loss and age. With gender, it wasn't done. We also didn't look at that in our study, also because the females were less than the males. Now I can't remember with the workstations one, like with our study, like I said, the engineering department had 18% in terms of the occupational noise-induced hearing loss, and then production 16%, manufacturing and mining at 7%. Those are the high risks one, which is also similar to the study that was done by Chadamboka. So I hope I answered.
Thank you very much for covering the questions. Sorry, Dr. Mutetwa, can you highlight, the steps to be taken towards ratification?
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the ratification process is something which will be motivated, obviously, by the social partners and various stakeholders out there in terms of the need for the country to take through the instrument through the ratification process. As you are aware, ratification is more of a law-making process where it has to go through Parliament. But suffice to say that given the interest which this particular instrument had on the international community, perhaps the country can consider looking at the ratification of this particular instrument. You'll note that when it comes to ratification, is really looking at our readiness as a country in terms of implementing the particular instrument both at law as well as in practice. And I'm sure that's why we have made an effort to make sure that as we speak right now, there is already a draft instrument on biological hazards, which will come along with the OSH bill when it is actually promulgated. But certainly the various steps when it comes to ratification, you will be able to be advised in public. It's more of a lawmaking process. It has to go through Parliament, but nonetheless, it depends on whether we are confident enough to say, are we ready for ratification with respect to the various legislative provision as well as in practice. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We can take another set of questions. There's a hand.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. My question is directed to Tinashe. I'm very sorry you'll be kicking all the questions. It was quite an exciting presentation. We have another pandemic that is currently growing, especially amongst the AMA2K, where some of them are actually working with audible sounds mightier than engine-driven factories. Imagine someone not hearing a train and is 10-kilometer water because of earphones and headphones. What legislative endeavors would you propose to save death in the earphone-generated noise? Because we don't know the decibels that those earphones and headphones are producing to an extent that they cannot hear a hooter of a train, and they can actually be hit by the train unknowingly. That's my question, Madam.
Thank you very much. Can you kindly introduce yourself?
Okay. All right, thank you. My name is Charlene from ZPC Caribbean. This question is directed to Tinashe. May you kindly clarify handling of cases of employees diagnosed with noise-induced hearing loss via audiometric tests, where these employees have prior work histories, specifically employee responsibility and their lifestyle, compensation and attribution by NASA, management and reporting by the current employer, and also perhaps guidance on handling employees removed from noise-exposed areas in the organization, maybe as a contingent plan by the employer. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Next to you.
My name is Crispin Moshiwa from Tonga Tulet. My question is directed to Dr. Betty. I think it's just a point of clarification. Does the OHS bill provide for ratification of international conventions? I think when you started, you did indicate that there is no plan for domestication of international convention. But then when you then cited the objectives of the bill, you did indicate, domesticating of international convention as one of the objectives. So, reading from the two, it sounded somehow not clear there. Just a point of clarification.
Thank you.
Okay, so if I may also come in.
Who is speaking? Kindly introduce yourself.
Okay, thank you, Madam. My name is Blessing Baywa. I'm from Technon Consulting International. My question is directed to Tinashe. I'm sorry, Tinashe, you're getting another blow. I wanted to check, Tinashe, in your research for noise-induced hearing loss, if you also looked at other factors that may also induce hearing loss, such as ototoxic chemicals, for those people that have exposure to chemicals that may accelerate noise hearing loss, such as heavy chemicals, arsenic, those old paints, and so forth and so forth. Then, as a follow-up to that, I wanted to also check if there's, in your research, a correlation between noise-induced hearing loss from those people that are exposed to noise, and also exposed simultaneously to the chemicals that may also cause chemical-induced hearing loss, if that correlation has been done, and to what extent does chemical-induced hearing loss accelerate the chemical exposure? To what extent does it also accelerate noise hearing, chemical-induced hearing loss?
Thank you. Tinashe, can you respond? And then to the questions asked.
Okay.
Starting with the one, on the use of headphones, obstructing the hearing of a train, what legislation, and the other questions which then followed. Over to you.
Okay, thank you again. Oh, so Doc had to remind me. With the question, I forgot to actually say, with the environment where they were testing, and then it's changed with the moved environment. So you also have to make sure that they're not being tested after they're coming from the mine or whatever. There has to be that rest period in between, because they'll be having that temporary shift. Okay, so to answer the earphones questions, when people always ask me that question, I always say, because my earphones actually don't have a problem. But the issue, the gadget itself does not have a problem. How you use it is where the issue is. So if someone stands right next to you and they can hear what you're listening to, it means it's too loud. And then in addition, with our phones now, when you try to increase the volume, the button, it will get to an area, it changes color from whether it's blue to orange, telling you that where you're going is too loud. So those are the things that are there to notify, our young ones if they're exposing themselves to dangerous levels of noise. So with WHO, there's a campaign that they did, I think about 2 years ago. I think you can also look them up because the resources are free and available online on safe listening practices. So those things that are addressed in that report. So it's not just safe listening practices recreationally, like you're saying, with our young people, or even in the workplaces. So a lot of the answers on how to do it are put in there. So like I mentioned even that sometimes you need to have a space where someone can come out of the noisy area and have some rest to be able to give their ears a chance to breathe and then go back in again. So a lot of the questions regarding to safe listening practices can be found that have been developed by the World Health Organization online. And then the handling of employer cases. So unfortunately, some of these questions you're asking me, they're really outside of my jurisdiction. It's on the employer, the HR policies to handle. So we will just give you our medical opinion. If we feel someone has to be moved from this place to the other, we will give you our medical opinion. What you will then implement or do is up to you, because if we try to meddle in it, real life examples we get, like we're saying, we get people who come and then they will now want to bribe me and say, just make my results normal because nakabviskwa uko. I'm going to lose income. Maybe they were earning a certain amount and now that area, whether it's, I don't know, admin or whatever, they'll be earning less. So it then gives ethical implications and things like that. So we don't dwell in that. We do our tests, we tell you what we find, and then you as the employer, then you make those decisions. But as the employer, like you're saying, you have the responsibility to put in a hearing conservation in place and make sure you're doing your pre-assessments, your annual assessments and your exit assessments, and you are on the right side and you have all that data with you that can inform you if this person looks like they're starting to get affected. We will advise you on what to do, and then it's up to you whether to take it up or not. The one with the ototoxic chemicals, so because our study was retrospective, then obviously the data that was collected was specific to noise and not on any ototoxic chemicals that might be there. Actually, I'm not even sure if there are a lot of studies that look at chemical toxins with noise, but it's an interesting thing that you can look at and see if there's any correlation to it. But when we were managing some MDR-TB patients, so we know with MDR-TB they are on ototoxic medication, especially if they're on aminoglycosides and things like that. And sometimes what we would find that you start off everyone the same. Before they start treatment, you do your pre-test, and then once they start, you're doing ideally your monthly checks, but you find that someone can go through the whole 18 months or whatever, 2 years treatment, and their hearing doesn't change. And then someone within a week, the hearing changes. So sometimes there are those factors, your genetic factors, how susceptible are they to it? So you end up now tailor-making it to that specific person. So that's why it's important for everyone to be tested, because not everyone is going to respond the same.
Okay, thank you. Over to you, Dr. Betty, on the ILO conventions.
Thank you, MC. Allow me to first of all maybe assist on the issues of workplace management of noise-induced hearing loss. What then happens to a person who has been diagnosed? These are some of the gaps that we have in our local legislation and our local guidelines. So together with the new bill that we are looking at, we are going to be developing such. At the moment, we have been just using best practice as far as managing those. But you could look into NASA for assistance in managing your workers who then are affected by noise-induced hearing loss, as well as development of your hearing conservation programs, which then safeguards both the worker themselves as well as the production that you need within the company. Coming to the question which was directed at me on our conventions, I'm not sure how I had presented it, but the process, the ILO conventions and other international instruments, they are legal instruments. Once we ratify, they become binding on us. That's why I had highlighted the ones that we have ratified. On the technical conventions related to oil search, we have 6 ratified conventions. And the Convention 187, we are in the process of ratification. The process of ratification goes through, like what Dr. Mtetwa talked about. We have to assess our readiness as a country so that when we are assessed by the standard of that particular convention, we are ready and confident that we are fully covered at law and in practice. So for us, Convention 187 is something that we are really looking into. And the reason why we also are being forced to be on the fast forward in ratification is that it's now a fundamental, a core convention which looks at the fundamental rights at work. It means every signatory country to the ILO, a member of ILO, is bound by this particular convention, whether you have ratified it or not. The road to ratification of the other ones, like the other one that I highlighted, the agriculture, us being an agriculture economy, the convention becomes very important. Even as we make our laws, we take reference to those international conventions, whether ratified or not. This is the reason why, as part of our principles for the bill, one of the things that we wanted to do is to make sure that there is full expression of what is in the conventions, both ratified and unratified within our Act. This then aids in our compliance to international standards by putting it into our local law and also in practice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Betty. Thank you, our panelists, for your presentations and also answering the questions which came from the floor. Let's give them a big round of applause. If I may kindly ask you to remain seated where you are. We have one last slot on NBS. NBS is our sponsor. They had requested for 10 minutes. You have a question? Oh, okay. Can we have a mic? Comrade Shamu. NBS, can you come forward? And after the question, you can then present. In the meantime, you can take a seat. Thank you.
Thank you, MC, for giving me this opportunity. Right. Mine is directed to Dr. Betty and perhaps the rest of the other panelists, but precisely to Dr. Betty. When we talk of occupational health and safety, it's very clear and to the point. But let's also understand that beyond occupational safety at work, workers, even new managers, all of us, we go back to our homes. And this is where we are seeing a lot of menace or nuances by these upstarts, indigenous Pentecostal churches. You see, they spend the whole night clamoring, just so much as and I don't know what type of gadgets they use. You see, the worker was protected at work. Now, kumba kwake kwa haifiri zikupi, kuitwa noise nema pastors. All these things, you see. So, are we not undoing whatever we are trying to do? It's a precursor to all of us. And I think we need to put these people to line. They are just being a menace to us. I so submit.
Thank you. Thank you. Comrade Shamu. Dr. Betty, do you want to share with us your insights on that one?
Thank you, and thank you, Comrade Shabu. I don't know whether I can adequately respond to that question. It was directed to me and the other panelists. But the issue is on empowering people with education, giving people education. I know that in some countries where they have done a lot in education, you'll find that you'll get a person in a bar with hearing protection. So our wearables, I go to one of those churches, Comrade Shamu, and when I'm passing by the choir, my watch always says loud environment. So it doesn't matter where the noise is coming from, it will cause hearing loss. And the important thing and the good thing about the workplace is that it empowers us. So what we can do as policymakers, as people who are charged with people's health, even the SHE practitioners in here, is to give as much information as possible and give the people the power to then protect themselves. But any noise that people are exposed to, be it in the bar, be it at church, it does have effects on your ears. I don't know if you want to say something.
Yeah, so I think it also comes to, I don't know if they're called zoning laws. Yeah, so because in some areas, then those zoning laws that can be applied, like you're saying, sometimes it can become a nuisance and things like that. So those things can also be used to put in place, and then protecting themselves, like they can, the musicians even themselves, they are those musicians' earplugs that can be used. But don't you want to?
Okay, it looks like there are more discussions. I had closed this session, and I'm seeing more hands, including the Honorable. So I'll come to you, Honorable. Perhaps maybe there's a lady who wants to compliment what Dr. Betty has said. Over to you. You identify yourself.
My name is Angela Shtarara. I'm from Tonga Tulit. I'm not complimenting what Dr. Betty said, but I've got a small question to Mr. Mtetwa. I'm looking at the molds, the fungi, the bacterial fungi that are caused through the evaporating plants and the ventilation systems. Do they also fall in the biological hazard convention, or maybe since they also affect the lungs, is it part of the pneumoconiosis, or where do these conditions fall into?
Okay, thank you. I was alerted that there's someone who also wanted to contribute to Dr. Betty's answer. You are the lady?
Yes.
Okay, please proceed. Identify yourself.
Okay. My name is Priscilla Chakawa from NAST, Department of Architecture. So after having heard that question about churches now being within households, and then someone coming from a workplace, then they still receive the most decibels from their residential homes, I think it's best directed towards the overall planning changes that we're having within cities and illegal use of spaces and illegal change of use of spaces. Because when we look at our overall local plans, we discover that every location, every residential place, every industrial place has got a certain zoning aspect to it, in a way that even in terms of square meterage of one person versus the whole overall area, it comes back to the idea of illegalization of spaces. So maybe if we can have our legislators in the area of planning and development rearranging or replanning or redesigning
how the overall spaces are now working, given that our population is growing each and every day. We might have to direct it towards our legislators for that respective area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Over to you, Honorable. Mike.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. In terms of planning, the last presentation actually read from my book. But what we must understand also is that the stuff called bylaws in local authorities. I think those must. I think we need actually to enact legislation that directs the legality or illegality of bylaws. Another point where I can come in, I think there was a question on whether or not the occupational safety and health bill actually provides for ratification. What actually happens is a ratification is provided for by the Constitution, which is the supreme law of the land, particularly Section 327. What happens is the executive, that is, be the president or a representative of the executive, who goes out to a conference and they come back with a convention to which they have agreed that in as much as it's binding on the nation as per the ILC or ILO standards, it is not binding locally until that is ratified by Parliament. By ratification of Parliament, what I mean is the convention is read in the House, normally by the minister responsible, that we have agreed to this. Until there is no debate in Parliament, that does not become binding. It might sound rosy, but is it in sync with maybe our norms and practices locally? But what I can say is, on behalf of the Portfolio Committee on Public Safety, Labour and Social Welfare, I like what the ministry does. They start by domesticating, sort of implementing the statutes within these conventions, after which they would then come to Parliament. It's a question of ticking boxes. This is already being done. Therefore, there's no need for us not ratifying. So literally, it is not the act that provides for ratification, but the act domesticates text from the conventions and implements at home, then Parliament ratifies. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that clarification. I think it's clearer now, the process of this biological hazard instrument going forward. I think we have covered everyone. We had a burning question, but I also want to say that maybe we can continue with this conversation during our lunch. If you bump into any of my panelists and you feel that there's a question, please, by all means, do. Otherwise, thank you. What remains is for me now to invite NBS, our sponsor, to come and talk to us for 5 minutes, I'm told. Can you identify yourself and then you proceed?
Thank you very much and good afternoon. My name is Fiso Matlang. I'm the Managing Director at the National Building Society. I can see my staff are right at the back there, so my delivery is going to be very short because I recognize that it's lunchtime, so people are not really going to be listening. But as people that have been that are sponsoring to tomorrow's dinner, we also have been given another slot to do the comprehensive presentation on our product bouquet. So, honorable government ministers that are here present, our permanent secretary, Mr. Masanga, the NASA board chairman, Mr. Christopher Dube, the NASA general manager, Dr. Charles Shaw, and the management and staff for NASA that are here present, the NBS board chair, which is Mr. Mutumbwa in absence, and the board of directors or NBS, the NBS EXCO members are here present and the staff. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to say all protocol observed. On behalf of NBS, we stand here with profound gratitude and pride as we celebrate this significant conference with our principal shareholder, NASA, at this Safety and Health at Work conference. As a subsidiary that is born from NASA's vision, we recognize that workplace safety and social security are foundational to building thriving communities. These values align perfectly with our mission as your bank of choice, delivering 360-degree banking and housing solutions. From a financial perspective, NBS remains committed to supporting initiatives that enhance safety, health, and the well-being of every individual. We pledge our continuous partnership in advancing projects which transform lives and create secure future for Zimbabweans. We are here not just as a bank, but as the brainchild of NASA, whose investment in NBS has created an environment to provide roofs over people's heads, which marks our further contribution to the overall safety of workers. I invite you all to visit our stand outside today and explore our variety of products and, of course, walk away with some goodies that reflect our appreciation for your continued trust and custom. Together with NASA, we are building hope, security, and a better Zimbabwe. As NBS, we shall continue to build, continue to bank, and of course, naturally go beyond. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much. Let's give our MD another round of applause. Okay, Engineer Marunza, can you come forward and guide us on the parallel sessions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just going to give instructions in terms of what will be happening in the afternoon. We have got 4 breakaway sessions, and we'll be breaking into Kalala room for regulatory and OSH standards for effective prevention action. Just 1 second. Yes, just some clarification that I needed. So we are going to have engineers in here doing that, and the focus is on discussions will center on the role of national and international OSH regulations and standards in strengthening preventive action and compliance in the workplace. So those that registered for regulatory and OSH standards for effective preventive action, kindly note that you will be in Kalala room. And those that registered for chemical safety in the workplace, focusing on exploring strategies and innovations for managing chemical risks in various work environments to enhance employee health and environmental protection, you will be meeting up in Kalundu room. All these venues are within the main hotel, and the sub-theme is chemical safety in the workplace. And then we have got another 3rd group that will be meeting in Gwai room, again within the main hotel, on occupational injury statistics, reporting, recording, and notification. This group will be led by Dr. Manditsera, and we will be focusing on examining best practices and tools for accurate data collection, reporting, and analysis of occupational injuries to improve prevention and response mechanisms. And then we have got the largest group that will be meeting here in the tent with the sub-theme sustainability and effective OSH practices Mr. Chibanda will be coordinating that session, and the discussion will send around integration of sustainability principles into occupational safety and health management systems for long-term workplace resilience. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You can take a seat. For the guidance on parallel sessions, I also have some administrative issues. Sunset cruise. The providers said that everyone must be at the hotel entrance by 15:45 hours. So if we can plan to end our parallel sessions around 3:15, because the delegates, they need to also have some tea before they go for the sunset cruise. Just a gentle reminder to also register, if you haven't registered, that you want to go on the cruise. Thank you. Administrative issues, I don't know whether there are issues to do with lunch tickets. Yesterday there was a mix-up of, is that sorted today? Okay. All right, so thank you very much. We break for tea. Let's applaud our panelists as they step down the podium.